Hey, welcome everyone.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining.
Let me do a quick intro. Oh my goodness, you are so help me welcome today by putting a little clap mark in your. No, I don't know that we can do that. We can't see everyone on the webinar today, but we've got Vinh Giang today. He's an experienced keynote speaker. He knows what transpires on stage is not all about him. It's an amazing reality check, isn't it? It's 100% about the audience. It's about life-changing lessons that he's been so fortunate to learn along the way in sharing with people and really on stages where the magic happens, you saying, but you're also a magician and you are an entrepreneur. So I feel so grateful to you for providing some learning and training for our doctors today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for it's always hard for me to listen to introductions because I'm like, oh God, they're just reaving out my achievements. Yeah, it makes me feel so awkward. I don't know what to do while you say that. So thank you. Very lovely of you. Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here.
So we had a little chat last week about the types of issues that I see in my practice that come up for doctors when they are communicating. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily about making presentations on stage that we're going to be talking about today, obviously. It's about that everyday communication, which is what is so critical to us getting what we want out of life, I suppose. And I'll have a quick chat towards the end about negotiation skills and how the communication skills are kind of are the bedrock of that, aren't they?
Well, I think first of all, we should address kind of the whole, the stage versus one-on-one or 1 to 3 or 1 to... I've got a program and I call it stage. And the reason I call it stage is because every time you communicate with anyone, it's a form of a stage. It's like when I step out of my studio and into the lounge room later with my son, I'm kind of stepping on stage as a dad to play with my son even.
Yes.
So to me, every single one of our interactions, another way of putting it is some people say, oh, I don't do public speaking. You do. If you speak in public, you're publicly speaking. So to me, we shouldn't kind of look at them as two different things all the time. Okay. They're kind of the same thing.
All right.
Yeah. And I think when you're one to many, you can be very impactful. But when one-on-one, you have the opportunity to be extremely influential in that case because you're interacting one-on-one with someone. So to me, public speaking, presentation skills, it's important in all areas of our lives.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a good, I hadn't really thought about it that way. And I think that's the best thing about talking to you. I always learn something. Even after our call last week, I talked to my husband, Dave, who you know well, about my chat with him. He's like, you can talk to Vinh as many times a day as you need to.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. But I think that helps kind of, the audience, the doctors here kind of understand why it's relevant, because all the skills you learn in public speaking and presenting, it's applicable when you're sitting there across from the patient, right? All the tools that we're probably going to talk about today, it's applicable because these are the tools to help you become more influential in building your brand as a doctor. I think it's so important to become conscious of how you use your voice.
And doctors might not often think of themselves as a brand.
Right.
Not all doctors probably have a website with their name like you and I do.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear more about how you think doctors are a brand and how they can build that.
I mean, let's take the simplest example, right? I just came back from the United States about 4 months ago, and I've been looking for my family GP, so for someone for me. So I've been kind of shopping around, and I went through, the process of interviewing and seeing about 5 or 6 doctors to go, oh, who do I really connect with? Who do I like?
Yes.
And something really interesting, right? In the world of, say, brand building, let's say that's relevant for doctors, there's 2 things you have to be conscious of. The first thing is your visual image, right? And your visual image is how you dress and how you look. And I have to tell you that all the doctors I went to see, the visual image was great. They looked professional. They seemed professional.
Excellent.
But the area that they pay no attention to, or most often, most professions don't pay any attention to, is your vocal image.
Yes.
It's easy for us to buy the clothes that we wear. It's easy for us to put on the coat. That's easy to do. What's hard to do is think about what image are people creating in their minds the moment you open your mouth and you speak. Well, what feelings do you give off? I mean, just like how people, when they look at you, they create assumptions as to who you are as a person.
Yes.
So this is something that people don't realize. And I love this whiteboard. It's so cool.
It looks incredible. Much more impressive than the one behind me.
No, it's all good. But visual image, right? Visual image, when people see you, they create assumptions. They create assumptions about who you are as a person. So, you know, if you dress nice and you dress well, I mean, lawyers do this equally as well. But when they see you, they go, oh, this person looks like a professional. So visual image comprises of how you dress and your body language. So if you dress well, they go, oh, they look like a professional. They look trustworthy. They look like an expert. But it's assumptions. They're making assumptions about you.
Yes.
And if you wear a smile and you got good posture, they assume you to be friendly. They assume you to be confident.
Yes.
But remember, that's assumptions. What's really interesting is once you open your mouth and you speak and you reveal your vocal image. I've got handwriting like doctors, don't I? My mum would have been so proud.
She would have been proud. I'm sure she is
She would have
proud.
been. Oh, yeah, more so if I was a doctor. But vocal image, what's fascinating about vocal image is once you reveal your vocal image, they will turn these assumptions now into beliefs, right? So up here, if they assumed you were friendly, they assumed you were an expert. If you kind of reveal your vocal image and it's in sync with your visual image, now they believe you're an expert. Now they believe you're friendly. Now they believe you're confident. And while it's easy to create, you know, it's easy to create positive assumptions because we can buy the clothes we wear. What's dangerous is you look the part, but the moment you reveal your vocal image, it doesn't sync. It completely misses.
Mismatch.
And that's what I experienced. So I experienced that a lot. Again, not only in the medical industry, but in a lot of industries where you have these preconceived ideas, great assumptions going in, and then they kind of use their voice and you're like, oh, wait, are they an expert? Oh, they don't sound very confident. They don't sound like an expert. They don't sound very friendly. And it's often not the case. It's often that they are an expert, they are knowledgeable, they are friendly, but because we don't pay attention to our vocal image, we let ourselves down. And I still haven't been able to pick a local GP, but my wife, we're trying to have another baby, but we went through a couple of doctors for her and we found an incredible doctor. And I've got, you know, amazing visual image, but amazing vocal image. And every time we sit down, we talk to her, gosh, I feel inspired. Like it's different. It's amazing. So I think this is where we can spend a bit of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't think about it, or we get lazy, or we just do what we do. And
we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times, I mean, let's use this as an example, right? The people on this Zoom call right now, you know, you all know who Sarah is, but you don't know who I am. So you're all making assumptions about who I am as a person when you saw me, but now you've also formed some beliefs about me. You believe I'm a certain way now. You know, do you believe I'm an expert in this area? Do you believe I'm confident? Do you believe I'm friendly? Like, think about what beliefs you formed about me in your head right now.
In 10 minutes.
Yes, and this is done because of these two things. And I think, you know, doctors at some point will think about their personal brand because, you know, maybe your aspiration is to one day have your own practice, and you know, and that's when brand matters. And think about it this way: when people meet you, when they go home, what do they say to their partner about you?
Do they say what you just said about Pei Wen's?
Yes, yes, that's exactly right. You know, and that's what I mean by brand, because it's generally, I think, in the GP world or in the kind of medical world, it's really about that word of mouth as well, which is the same as, I'm sure, in the legal world, and the same in my world as a keynote speaker. Word of mouth alone allowed me to build a global career, and I'm from Adelaide, from the northern suburbs. I'm one of those bogans you hear about on TV. But if you build your brand correctly, just through the simple use of visual and vocal image, you can actually go pretty far.
And that's interesting what you said about, I actually think specialists really need to think about building their brand, because their referrals come from GPs.
Right.
And then their patients come back to the GP and say what they were like.
One thing that I hope to be able to, as a teacher in the realm of communication, one thing that I really want to shift people's minds on is start to view your voice as an instrument. You know, and people often don't think about it that way. They think, oh, my voice is just my voice. It's just what carries my words, and they put a lot of effort into thinking what words they're going to use, but they put no effort, almost no effort, into how they're going to say it.
The delivery.
Yeah, and the simple analogy I use, Sarah, is you could have the greatest piece of music by Beethoven, but if you play it poorly, will people perceive it to be the greatest piece of music? And more than this, you can play music that will move people and influence people, or you can play music in a way that it's in one ear and out the other. And this is relevant, I really believe, especially in the medical world, because you have the knowledge that can actually change somebody's life.
Yes.
And change the trajectory of their health and their quality of life. You have that information as medical professionals. And if you play that song correctly, they will change their eating habits. They will start to exercise. They will start to live a more fruitful life. Or you could play that music with no effort and no change comes as a result. So to me, that's how I think of it, especially when I think about doctors, is I had a doctor in the US that, my goodness, he motivated the crap out of me. But again, it was, and I've had kind of contrasting experiences where another professional said the same thing, but the way they said it, it didn't move me. And the easiest example of this is if you look for examples on YouTube and you watch a motivational speech with a backing track that's inspiring, and then you watch one without it,
it doesn't feel the same way.
Yes, right? It's why movies they spend hundreds of millions at sometimes, or millions of dollars on, you know, these beautiful soundtracks by Hans Zimmer, because they want to move you, because they know that the dialogue isn't enough.
Yes.
So when you start to view your voice as an instrument, you start to realize you can be influential, not only in what you say, but how you say it. And there's just always this debate, right? Is what you say more important or how? Why not both?
Yes.
So to me, first of all, I think it's a mindset shift that I'd love to share with the audience, which thank you for letting me share that. But shift that mindset. It's not just what you say. What you say is absolutely important, but how you say it is just as important.
So there's so many elements to that how you say it part.
Yeah.
Is that something you want to touch on today?
I think so. Let's do this. So to me, when you think of your voice as an instrument, we've got to learn the vocal foundations, because now that you've kind of understand that there is such thing as a vocal image, and what kind of image are people painting in their heads the moment they hear your voice, we need to learn how to style ourselves vocally.
Yes.
And we can style ourselves vocally by learning the vocal foundations. So okay. So when it comes to the vocal foundations, there are 5 core things, and I'd love to show everyone some examples if we've got time as well.
It's very powerful to see the examples.
Yeah, sure. So the first one is rate of speech. It's very easy not to put any thought into rate of speech. And when you don't put any thought into rate of speech and understand how to use it in a meaningful way, we get stuck in a default rate of speech. And let's say I get stuck in this default of speech. After a while, everything I say rather becomes quite monotonous, doesn't it? It does, just naturally does. And we've got to learn that a slow default rate of speech is not effective nor meaningful. A really fast default rate of speech like this is not effective nor meaningful as well. But the key here is you have to learn how to vary your rate of speech.
Yes.
And there's a really simple rule of thumb to use, and it allows you to vary your rate of speech with meaning. And the rule is, when you're speaking about something very important, slow down. Give people time to absorb what you've said, especially if you're explaining something complex to a patient. Slow down. Or if you want to highlight its importance, you need to listen to me. All of a sudden, that is more powerful than you need to listen to me.
I have done this where I've said to staff members, we need to have a conversation and it's not going to be a good one. Because it helps get whatever message you're trying to get, like they absorb that and then they're like, ready.
Yes. And it's also a form of a highlight.
Mm.
You're highlighting to them what is important, Sarah. You need to focus here. Otherwise, if I talk like this the entire time and I say, we need to have a talk later, it's really important. And after that, I also want to be able to do this. To them, you're not telling them what to focus on. And to me, especially when you're communicating with a patient and it's something serious, or you want to be able to move them towards taking action and changing their lifestyle, you've got to tell them where to focus. Because often maybe they're scared, maybe they're panicked, maybe they're confused. As I believe a health professional, we need to be able to communicate in a way that's more effective to say, hey, I really need you to focus on this. And then if it's not as important, kind of speed up. And that simple little rule allows you to vary your rate of speech.
I think it takes practice though.
It does. It absolutely does. It's like driving a car, right? You don't think about indicating. You don't think about the handbrake. You don't think about the roof. You just do it. You just think, where do I want to go? You get in the car and you just do it. This stuff is the same thing. You've got to consciously practice it. And then once you master it, it becomes unconscious. So I'll show you an example. Let me just bring everyone over here. I've got to move my computer, so give me a sec. The rate of speech example, this one here. So what I'm going to throw you to is one of my students, and you'll see her natural rate of speech is fairly quick. But watch what happens when she slows down. Watch how much more impactful she is. Check this out. Okay, so starting in 3, 2, 1.
There comes a time in everyone's life that clearly defines them as a person. For some, it happens when they're older. For others, it happens when they're young. For me, it happened when I was 6 years old. There comes a time in everyone's life that clearly defines you as a person.
Slower.
For some, it happens when they're older. For others, it happens when they're young.
Stop. See the difference? And I'll relate this to my experience, because I in the last 10 years, I've been to the doctors a bit with some family members because they weren't well and whatnot. It's so easy to speak quickly, I believe, because now I train quite a number of doctors as well. It's easy to speak quickly because we're having similar conversations often. And you know your content. You're like, oh my goodness, I've described this same kind of symptoms and this same kind of illness 1,000 times already. And as a result of that, people often speak quickly because I've had this conversation many times. The patients perceive it as, you don't care. A, you don't care. B, you just don't even seem like you're passionate about this, because again, there's no variety. And often what happens when a medical professional is willing to slow down, it's not that you have to spend 20 minutes with me, but by you slowing down just for that little moment, you give me the perception that you care about me. You're like, again, Sarah, you need to focus on exercise. Versus, Sarah, you need to focus on exercise. Which one seems like I care more? So you can see there simply how just rate of speech radiates care. Again, just a simple example, but I want you to see that that's what just rate of speech alone can do for one of my students. You saw how when she was speaking very quickly, and then after that, when she slowed down.
I had tingles.
Yeah.
When she was slowed down.
So that's kind of just one foundation, and we'll go over them. We'll go over them fairly quickly, but because I want to give people a sense of all 5.
Yes.
So then the second one is volume. And volume really is the lifeblood of your voice. So volume gives life to every single other foundation that I'm going to share. And I often think of volume as having a scale of 1 to 10. And a lot of my students, they come to me and right now I'm communicating at about a 5 or a 6. So when I'm using a 5 out of 6 out of 10, which is fairly strong projection, it makes me seem more confident.
Yes.
I come across with more authority.
Yes.
I seem like I have vitality.
You do.
And well, it seems like I do. But the final thing that also comes across is it seems like I believe in the things that I'm saying, doesn't it?
Mm.
Whereas if I drop my volume to, say, a default volume a lot of people tend to use, if I kind of drop it to, say, about a 3, so just imagine I spoke here, and this is a level 3 volume. This requires no effort for me at all. And all of a sudden, think about my level of confidence. Think about my level of authority or my level of vitality. Does it seem like I believe in the things I'm saying? Does it seem, again, like I care? Right? So all of a sudden now, when we put less effort into volume, we lose all of those wonderful qualities. And again, I bring it back to the care, because in the medical world, you know, that's so much of what you do is, if I come to see you and I walk away and I felt like you cared, that's actually a part of the healing process.
Yeah.
I feel better when people care. It's why I always go to mum when I'm not feeling well, or sometimes my wife, right? Because the care in the voice matters. So think about your default volume. I mean, are you breathing vitality into these sessions? I'll show you an example again.
Right.
I love this example because one of my students here, especially, I don't mean to call this out, but especially in the Asian culture, we tend to use a fairly low volume. And it's usually because, I want to be respectful and whatnot, but using a louder volume doesn't mean we're being disrespectful. It means sometimes we're being more effective. So I want to show you this particular example here.
The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty world. I don't care how tough you are. You'll beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean place and nasty place. And I don't care how tough you are. It will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it.
Wasn't that brilliant?
So good.
Right? And to me, all of a sudden, who would you listen to? Who's more influential? The second version, right?
Second version, absolutely.
And you almost feel inspired. You almost feel like kind of like lifted, and you when you speak in that way, you also give people energy.
Yes.
Again, so to me, volume is very powerful. So once you know these, you can kind of go through an auditing process and you can self-audit, right? Now, that's volume. The next one is pitch and melody. Pitch and melody. And pitch and melody is all the different notes that you can hit. Simple thought experiment for the listeners later and the listeners on right now.
Yes.
Think of a favorite book that you've read multiple times. Right? If I asked you to recite for me, word for word, a page in the book that you've read many times, word for word, you have to recite for me the entire, just one page, could you do it without getting one word wrong? The answer is probably no, right? And some of them are probably saying no right now. But think of a favorite song that you sing often. If I asked you to recite that song word for word without getting one word wrong, you probably can do it.
Yes.
Why can you do that, yet not a page in the book? Because a song has roughly 300 words. A page in the book has roughly 300 words. We can recite a song because it has melody, which reveals to us that if you add more melody to if you add more melody to your voice, what you say becomes then more memorable. And another example to really kind of kick this point home is the following. I'll share with all of your listeners now, actually. So for the listeners on now, engage with me in the chat section. I'm going to play for you a piano song. And as you're all listening to this piano song, type the words of what it makes you feel, and I'll type it. So have a listen to this. Have a listen to this song and type me the words that come to mind. Perfect. So we got melancholy, we got calming, we got soothing, peaceful, beauty. For me, it felt a bit sad. Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's try one more. So thank you for engaging everyone on the call right now. I appreciate it. So what about this one? Perfect. So, we've got kind of inspiring, growth, excitement, anticipation, bright, uplifting. Again, so that was kind of more positive kind of emotions, right? What's really interesting to note here is that none of these songs had any words. Yet it was able to communicate a world of meaning to so many of our listeners right now, including yourself, Sarah, including me, right? And what I'm trying to kind of help you realize here is that there's a melody that lives underneath your voice. This is why we say, oh, when so-and-so walks into the room, they lift the energy in the room. Or we know the opposite to be true too. When sometimes someone walks into the room and they just kind of sap the energy out of the room. I mean, it's not magic what's happening there. What's happening there from a pragmatic sense is it's the melody that that person came into the room with. It's the body language that that person brought into that room. It's your vocal and your visual image. So you've got to become aware of, and really think about this as health professionals, is that when a patient steps into your practice, steps into your consulting room, how's your body language? And how's the melody that lives underneath your voice? Is it one that's filled with compassion, kindness, and care? Or is it one that is playing a song of, look, I don't have enough time, I just got to get through this really quickly? These can be felt by other people through the melody that lives underneath your voice. And it's so important to be conscious of this, right? And when you don't have melody, what you say is not memorable, and therefore it's not influential, therefore ultimately you're not impactful. So to me, it's so important to have that melody in our voice because it drives so many important factors. So that's melody. Now, I do want to bring you to the next point, which I think is a really important foundation. The next foundation is tonality. And tonality is different to pitch, okay? Tonality is the emotion that lives underneath your voice. Pitch and melody is the different notes that you can hit. This is the emotion.
Okay.
In psychology, they've kind of discovered there are 6 core human emotions. You've got happy, sad, angry, surprise, disgust, and fearful. 6 core human emotions. And with each core human emotion, there's a corresponding facial expression.
Okay.
So if you do a disgusted face, then all of a sudden you sound disgusted, right? And if you do a sad face, then all of a sudden you sound sad. I'm not talking about anything sad, I just sound sad. The problem that you've got to really be aware of is not really those expressive faces, but you've got to be careful of what's known as a blank face. This happens a lot in all professions.
Yeah.
Because when you put no effort into thinking about your facial expressions, you get stuck in what is known as a blank face. And I'll give you blank face, Vin, just for 10 seconds. Okay, so this is pretty much me with a blank face. And if I'm talking to you about communication with a blank face, I talk about, say, tonality, for example. Notice how there's no emotion in my voice right now. It's kind of almost comedic. But this is when you come across as being cold. This is when you come across as being, and it's very easy for people to go, oh, that person, is like a robot, or just so cold and inauthentic. That's what happens. This is what people start to form in their minds about you when they meet you and you don't move your face.
Yes.
And the most bizarre thing happens when you put a slight smile on your face. All of a sudden, there's more melody in your voice. And it's amazing what happens when someone becomes more conscious of their face. Because when you move your face, it moves your voice.
And how you feel.
Yes. And it humanizes you so that it's easier for your patients to connect with you.
And relate to you, yes.
Yeah, and to me, again, connection, caring, these are such massive elements when it comes to healing. And let me show you an example here. This one's one of my favorite examples, because when you watch this, you watch how in this video, Peter, he's one of my students, watch how he humanizes himself the second time round. Check this one out.
You get a little crinkle above your nose when you're looking at me like I'm nuts. And I love that you are the last person I want to talk to before I go to sleep at night. And it's not because I'm lonely, and it's not because it's New Year's Eve. I came here tonight because when you...
Angry face.
Like I'm looking at when I'm nuts.
Yeah.
And I love that you are the last person I want to talk to before I go to sleep at night.
Happy, really happy.
And it's not because I'm lonely, and it's not because it's New Year's Eve. I came here tonight because
Surprise.
when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody.
I love this example, right? The second version, didn't he just come across more human?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much easier to connect with someone like that. And until you connect with someone, they often don't care about what you have to say. Once you have connection, you now become more influential as a result of that connection. You know, and I think that's more important than ever, because we live in a world now where patients often think they're really smart because they can go to Google, right? And they already have a list of things they want. Yes, they do, because they go, oh, I already know what I want. This is the symptom, just give me this. But sometimes they're wrong. More often than not, they're probably wrong. And for you to go against what they already have in their minds requires connection. And if you don't connect and show them that you care, they just see you there as being someone that, look, I already know what I want. Just give me the damn drug. And when you can do this, this allows you to be more influential in your career path. They will no longer see you as a person I go to just to get whatever I want, but they genuinely see you as the way we should be seeing a medical professional, as an expert that I'm coming to for help.
Yes.
Whereas I do see the shift in the industry often. You know, all I'm going to this person for is this. Whereas I think, again, doctors have a huge opportunity here to improve their ability to communicate, to no longer be seen as that, but rather be seen as someone who can help us live a better life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that alone is just tonality, right? And the final one, which I think is critical, is the pause. That right there, probably more relevant in the medical industry than any other, because when you pause, you give people time to process what you've just said. And you're inviting conversation. When you pause, you give the other person the opportunity to, oh, did you have a question that you wanted to ask? If you enhance clarity when you communicate by using more pauses, you enhance connection, therefore leads to being more influential. Otherwise, if I just keep talking and I give you no opportunity to A, process what I've just said, but also no opportunity to jump in and say what you have to say because you have questions about clarifying what I'm saying, like this right now, nothing is being processed. You're not being influential. You're not. It's exhausting too.
Yes. But I think some people can be very, particularly experts, so doctors, lawyers, can feel a lot of fear around pausing when they're being the expert, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Well, because we fear it often, because what happens if I pause and they ask me something I don't know the answer to? You know, I think this is what I believe. The moment a teacher or an expert stops being a student, they're no longer a teacher or an expert. It's okay not to know something because you're forever a student. The moment an expert stops learning, I don't really kind of regard that as being an expert still. I think you've got to be a continuous student.
Yes.
It's part of leadership. It's a part of kind of being an expert. And a part of being a student is that there are things you don't know. And if you talk from a philosophical point of view, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So not knowing something is actually perfectly acceptable. So to me, don't be afraid of the pause. It's absolutely fine. It's exceptionally powerful, because when you get comfortable with the pause, another thing as a communication teacher that I see that takes away from your credibility, your authority, your level of influence, is when you're not comfortable with the pause, you're still kind of using a pause, but it's not a pause. You're filling the pause with an or an ah, which is called non-words, right? Or you fill the pause with a filler word, and then so, do you know what I mean? Like, and when you use fillers, filler words or non-words, it just robs you of credibility, everything. And worse, when you use filler words and non-words, it decreases the clarity of your message.
Yes.
And how important is your message as a health professional? Things you say could potentially have someone live an extra 15 years or even live an extra 5. So clarity is of utter importance, right? However, imagine I was teaching, you know, like going through the vocal vocal foundations, and can you see how it decreases the clarity of what I'm saying? Robs me of authority. You probably wouldn't listen to me as a communication teacher, would you?
Probably not. But I also think that a lot of those filler words that you mentioned are just bad habits.
Yes, it is.
So how do we consciously get out of that?
Firstly is the awareness.
Yes.
You first have to become hyper aware of what your non-words and your filler words are. So what I would do is, firstly, these are the 5 core foundations. I'm going to go into the awareness process in just a moment.
Perfect.
But I want to show everyone an example of the pause as well.
Yes, please do.
Feel the difference on this one. Just feel the difference. I'm biased. I love all my students, but check this one out. This one's powerful.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meritus, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legion, loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to the murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance. My name is Maximus Decimus Meritus, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son.
Pause. Hold. Go.
Husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Can you feel the intensity? Need I say more? I love that example.
So good.
And imagine you were using that foundation when you were delivering a strategy for someone to be able to improve the quality of their life. You're probably going to have more influence if you use the pause strategically. You've seen each one of the foundations. You've seen the power of each foundation used on their own.
Yes.
If you master all 5, it's exceptionally powerful. And people often look at it and go, oh, it's too simple. It can't be that powerful. No, but the most simple things, if mastered, I can't even think of a word to describe how effective it can be. So to me, these are the 5 core foundations that you've got to bring into your awareness to become conscious of. Now, in the world of magic, we use a very interesting tool to build self-awareness. This will lead me to a self-awareness tool. But over here, this is my close-up table. This is the device we use. It's a 3-way mirror, okay? So a 3-way mirror is used when we're practicing sleight of hand. So when I practice sleight of hand, I'm using this 3-way mirror to see what other people are seeing when they stand around me. So, if I did a certain move, I wanted to see what they see. All of a sudden, it allows me to have a kind of, 180 plus view of what people are seeing. So this helps magicians build exceptional self-awareness. That self-awareness is critical for us to be able to create magical experiences. Magic is interesting because magic is either astonishing or it's quite frankly shit, right? It's amazing or it's not, right? So magicians only have 2 gears, and we always aim for astonishment, not satisfactory. We aim for astonishment. And that is a vital tool that we use that allows us to build self-awareness. I've always wanted to create a 3-way kind of method for people to be able to review how they communicate. We look into a mirror every morning to do our hair, to dress ourselves. When's the last time you've looked into a communication mirror as a health professional, as a doctor? And here's the thing that I tell my doctors when I train them. Rarely will there be somebody in your environment professionally that can tell you you need to work on your communication skills, because often they're afraid of you. Often there's a status difference, right? And because of that status difference, they're not going to go, hey, doctor, I think you've really got to work on your ums and ahs. They're too scared to tell you. And I often tell my doctor students, look, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. I'm not afraid to tell you that you've got to work on this. Otherwise, it's taking away and robbing you of impact. So to me, I want to make doctors highly aware of this. You've got to go through this process, whether with a teacher or build self-awareness. It's more important than ever for a doctor to build self-awareness because, again, the environment you're in, you're usually at the highest status. People are afraid to tell you the truth.
Yes.
And there could be something metaphorically stuck in your teeth and they don't tell you. So Let's build that self-awareness, right? So to me, and it's a bit of a sore topic, but again, let's just call out the elephant in the room. But record and review. This is a process that can help you build self-awareness. So R&R, not rest and relax, but rather record and review. The first thing you do with this is record a 5-minute video of yourself. 5-minute video of yourself just speaking, maybe go through like an average consult. And if you normally consult your patient sitting down, sure. Film a video of yourself in your natural environment, just sitting down and just role play a conversation potentially with a patient. Just role play it. Film that video. Once you've got the video, you're going to review it in 3 different ways, kind of resembling the 3 mirrors.
Okay.
The first time you review it, grab the video and turn the sound all the way up. Press play, turn the camera around, don't look at it, just listen. Here you're doing an auditory review. And what do you review? Well, review your foundations.
Foundations.
How do you come across? Take notes. And here's the crazy thing, is that in all of your minds, you have a list of things you like in a great communicator. It's like you turned on this kind of virtual webinar right now, or you listening to this podcast. If Sarah and I didn't check off the things you liked in a great communicator, you would have already gone to the next podcast. So there's a list of things you like and there's a list of things you don't like. The problem is you've never applied these lists to yourself because you don't listen to yourself back.
Mm-hmm.
You don't watch yourself back.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do this, all of a sudden you can start to style yourself the way you want. You can start to style yourself vocally the way you want to come across. And sometimes the way we want to come across isn't the actual way we're currently coming across. This is why this is important. So you write a list of things. Oh, I need to use a bigger volume. I sound like I'm dying in here. I've got to add more life into the way I communicate. Sure. Then for 1 week, just work on volume. One thing at a time. But you're building the list of things to work on. That's auditory awareness.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is turn it on mute. Once you have it on mute this time, press play, just watch yourself. Because
I'm cringing at the thought.
but it's good cringing. It's cringing that
it is
self-development. It's cringing that will lead to growth, right?
Correct.
Visual review. Are you moving your face? That's the biggest one I'll ask you immediately off the bat. Are you moving your face? Right? And how about your body? Are you sitting at the computer? Are you facing the computer while you're talking to the patient? Or do you move your body consciously towards the patient to show you care? Maybe do you step away from the table that's blocking half of your body and do you lean forward to engage? You know, do you engage in a processing pose to show again that I'm intently listening to you? Or are your hands just by their side and not supporting you in your communication as a doctor? Start taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
Become aware of how you come across visually. Write what you like, write what you want to work on. Self-awareness. And then the final way you review yourself, you don't listen and you don't watch yourself. It's not a visual or auditory. Get your little 5-minute video transcribed. Get it transcribed. And then when you get it transcribed, all transcription services have an option where they go, would you like us to leave in your ums and ahs? Would you like us to also leave in your filler words, words you use repetitively? Yes and yes. Sit down with a highlighter and start to highlight which are my non-words and which ones are my filler words. Start to become hyper-aware. Am I using too much jargon? Am I using too much complex terms that it does show that I'm incredibly smart, but confuses the patient ultimately? Become very aware of the way you're communicating visually, vocally, and then on top of that, word choice and ums and ahs. This self-awareness, if you just go through it, if you did this 10 times over the next 10 weeks, once a week, it will clean up your vocal and visual image dramatically. There's that. So I've been talking a whole bunch. Sorry, Sarah.
So great. I wondered if maybe we should have some time for questions now before I start on the negotiation part.
Absolutely.
If anyone has questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. I think we also have a question button. Yes, but the chat is perfect. I can see that up.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you. It's so good to have all of those reminders. I'm a graduate of Vin's stage course. I don't know if you ever graduate though. It's a bit like you were talking about, I was thinking about it in terms of, you know, us as professionals, lawyers and doctors, we're always practicing. We're never mastering. Even though we have this profession, it's said that we practice, and it's the same with yoga, right? It's always a process of continual improvement.
Well, I mean, that's why they call it a medical practice, right? That's why they call it a legal practice. I think communication should also be called a practice.
Yes.
It's called communication practice. It's what it is. And here's the crazy part, Sarah, that I often think about. Once you build this skill, it will serve you for the remainder of your life. So the earlier you learn this, the more you're going to reap from its rewards. So I always tell my students, once and for all, let's master this skill set that allows us to improve every single area of our lives. Why wait?
Yes.
You know, because you're only reducing the amount of benefits you can receive from this skill set. We've got a question from Rachel. Yeah.
What about pronunciation and accents in terms of how to be clear and connect?
Look, this is a big one. A lot of my students are from the Asian ethnical background as well. So a lot of Chinese, Malaysian people, Vietnamese, and even Indians and different kind of Asian backgrounds. One of the most powerful things you can do to enhance clarity is, this is the question, this is how it normally comes in. Vin, is my accent a problem? And I told them, your accent is never a problem, but this is what the problem is. This is the golden rule in communication. If what you're doing distracts people from the message, then it is a problem. So accents can be a problem if it distracts people from the message. So this is how you improve it. It's not to get rid of the accent, it's to increase articulation. The accent isn't the problem, it's the articulation. So what I would say to my students to often do is grab a book. This is the most simplest remedy you can use. Once you've got the book, every day for 5 minutes, you have to read the book out loud with a strong volume, at least 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, and overdo the mouth movements. So if I was doing it, I would do it like this. Many comedians get a good laugh by doing nothing more than pointing to 5 minutes. It's exhausting, right?
It's exhausting.
Now the reason why accents become a problem is because let's say I've got a Vietnamese background. I'm using the Vietnamese set of mouth movements to speak the English language.
Right.
Which then, because I'm using the mouth movements from the Vietnamese language and speak English, it gives me a very heavy accent, which then often robs me of clarity.
And your message doesn't land as well as it could.
And often, sometimes they didn't understand what you said.
The first time, yeah.
Yes. And then, you know, this is a problem when people kind of make kind of slightly confused looks at you, or they go, so what did you mean? It's because, and again, they're scared to tell you that your accent's a problem because they're not a communication teacher. When you start to read the English language, you're learning the English mouth movements, which ultimately helps you increase your clarity and articulation. 5 minutes a day, that's all you've got to do, 5 times a week.
So not going to a speech therapist.
It really is. It really is. That's where I learned this technique from. Right?
Wow.
So I've got a speech therapist as a mentor of mine to help my students change their behaviors as communicators. So that's what I would highly suggest to improve pronunciation, because it's an articulation issue, not an accent. Yeah.
Face shapes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shall I go through my steps for preparing for negotiation? And
yes.
I've got to say, I saw Vin speak earlier this year, and he reminded me about a book called Never Split the Difference. It's by Cal someone, lost out on the top of my head, but Never Split the Difference, and it's fantastic for negotiation. So I saw someone mentioned earlier that they're in the process of negotiating their lease. And hopefully these steps really help you with that. So maybe I'll ask Vin to be my scribe. Because you've got the funkiest board that I've ever seen. I really want one.
Okay.
So the first step in preparing for a negotiation is not very complex. It's prepare. So thinking about everything that you want out of a negotiation is the first step, but it's not just preparing for yourself. You also need to prepare as though you are the other side. So think about, what does the other side want out of this? Do they want, in the earlier example of someone negotiating their lease, do they just want a hassle-free tenant who is going to make good at the end? Or do they want to be subletting the car park at some stage so that they can do their next property development, which would impact your practice because you then won't have as much car parking? So thinking about what they want in advance of speaking to them is really important. The second step is propose. So this is where you do the negotiation. And if you can do it in person, it is so much better than doing it. You're an excellent note taker. Doing it over the phone or by emails. Because one of the two most important things of doing it is being able to observe them and see how they are in the negotiation. Are they feeling defensive? Are they feeling like they're winning? How is their body language in this negotiation? And it also gives you a really good opportunity to engage with them and to drill down about what they're saying, because you can be finding out things that they're wanting that you, when you were preparing for them, never even knew by listening to them. And you might be able to strike a bargain that you never expected because you find out things that you didn't know, like Vin was saying earlier. So that's observe and engage, and also really not bringing, so the third step is bargain. So this is where you're working out, you've already prepared for yourself, you know what your best case scenario is, but through that in-person proposing, engaging, observing, you might find out other things that you didn't know were possible to negotiate. And so through this bargaining process, that it's usually a back and forth process, you find out what your best case scenario, what their best case scenario is. And often you'll meet in the middle, but sometimes you'll find out something that means that you meet somewhere that you never expected. And so with litigation, what we say in this bargaining process is that everyone always leaves a little bit disappointed. And that's why I detest litigation. I do feel like this stage, if you're negotiating on a high stakes negotiation for an agreement that you're putting in place, you have the opportunity to both win, for no one to leave a little bit disappointed. So the final stage is committing, the fourth step. And that's where you agree, you've finished your bargaining process and you're committing and you're putting in writing, preferably. I'm a lawyer. It's old-fashioned. I like to see agreements put in writing because I know that in the future that he said, she said always ends up a little bit differently than what everyone else remembered. And that's where we end up with that selling disappointment, which I hate that lawyers sometimes have to do. So proposing, committing, they're the final steps, making sure that you're putting it in writing and you can come back to it. And so if somebody earlier was saying they're doing a lease with the Shire, they might have very different expectations about how a lease looks and what they want than a commercial landlord, for example, or than your own self-managed super fund if it's your landlord. So hopefully that's a good way to end. If people do have questions about negotiation, I'm more than happy to take those as well. Vin, any questions on negotiation?
Well, I love this. What I'd say on top of this is just that how you use your voice throughout this process matters.
Yes.
Because remember, when you're sitting there and you're in the proposal process and you're sitting chatting to the person, and maybe as a doctor you want to propose this idea or this kind of percentage break or whatever it is, if you don't confidently state what you want, they can sit there and go, yeah, you don't really believe in yourself. I can actually squeeze you more on this.
Yes.
So all of that comes across when you're bargaining and you're going back and forth. If you're not using, again, strong body language, if you're not using strong volume, if you're not showing them tonality that this is something I want, then you will leave again disappointed. So to me, again, I think it just reiterates that you could be the best negotiator, but if you can't communicate well, will people perceive you to be that? And the last thing I'll leave them with is this. You may be the best doctor technically, 10 out of 10, technically brilliant, diagnosis ability, 10 out of 10. But if your ability to communicate is a 3 out of 10, will they perceive you to be a 10 out of 10 doctor or a 3 out of 10? You're only as good as you can communicate. So I think if you learn negotiation, you learn how to communicate well, you've already learned how to be a great doctor. You combine those things together, you're basically a superhero. Yeah.
I think that part about tonality with bargaining is really interesting because people can let their emotions get away with them in particularly in negotiations.
Yeah.
And having control over the tonality and emotion is extremely powerful in a negotiation as well.
That's right. That's right. Again, sometimes if you play the card, look, if you don't do this, I'm okay, I'll leave. Like sometimes they go, oh my goodness.
Sometimes there's been negotiations I've been in where I've used anger. Because there was just, when you were talking before in the same tone, and it felt like that for like 2 hours. And I was just like, we've got to change the energy level here or nothing's going to happen. And I've only done that a few times in my career, but it is powerful, but you still need to be in control of it.
That's right. I mean, showing emotions to me is always a powerful thing because words alone is not enough as a modality in communication. The emotion underneath it also speaks a world of meaning. Like, that's okay versus that's okay. Like, or that's okay. It all communicates a different thing. So again, tonality absolutely matters. And look, I hope everyone found this useful. Sarah, thank you for having me. And
Rachel's got one quick question.
Oh,
how do you, it might be more for me. How do you come back when you realize that you're really far down the track and that you have a different understanding and you didn't document what was agreed to? That is a good question, Rachel. I think that it depends on the answer. Lawyers always say it depends. It depends on what the issue is. And that's sort of when it gets into that dispute territory that my practice I just try and avoid because I feel like there's really never any winners out of that. Sorry. Thank you so much for your time today, Vin. It's been absolutely fascinating, as always, chatting to you. And how can people reach you if they want to reach out to you? I know you do training for doctors. I think the next couple of sessions are sold out, but how do they find out about future sessions?
Look, just send me an email. Send me an email. My email is Vin, so VINH @VINHGIANG.com. So
and
Vin at vingiang.com.
We'll pop that in the email that goes out as well, so people can find you.
Sarah, thank you. It's been an absolute treat. Thanks everyone for joining us live as well. And for those listening later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.